Rooftoppers Chapter 11. Now, Charles and Sophie have travelled to Paris by a train and by the ferry, and have found out that Sophia's mum's called Vivian Vere. She did used to play cello, and they went to the records to find the records for the ship that went down with her on it, and they are refusing to give her the records. So that's where we are. The nights were quieter in Paris than they were in London. Sophie couldn't sleep. Once she was in bed, the moonlight shone in brightly enough to read by, but Sophie stared at her book without seeing the words. She was frightened. She told herself that there was no reason to be afraid, but her pulse quickened and quickened until she couldn't breathe. Sophie tried to think of Charles, who was so kind and so amply beleaguered, and then she tried to think of her mother, who was perhaps only a few streets away. Neither helped. She could think only of being caught, and the horror there would be, and the happy twist there would be on Miss Elliot's face. Sophie heard the rest of the hotel settle into silence. She tossed in bed until her sheets and blankets were in a pile on the floor, but still she couldn't sleep. At last, Sophie climbed onto the bed and looked closer at the skylight. They had forgotten to buy oil, and when she tugged at the window fastening, nothing happened. The hinge was rusted and flaking. An idea came to her. Sophie whispered, "Yes." She ran down the stairs, two at a time. Outside the dining room she waited, listening at the door. It sounded empty. She darted in, seized the bottle of olive oil from the nearest table, and was out again before a mouse in the corner had time to do more than blink. Back in her bedroom, Sophie poured the oil over a handful of newspaper and dabbed at the hinge. After a few minutes, nothing had happened to the hinge, but the paper disintegrated stickily into her hands. She needed something tougher. "Cloth. I need cloth," Sophie whispered. "Perhaps a pillowcase would do, but the hotel might have strong opinions about that." Then she had a flash of inspiration. She pulled off one of her wool stockings, put it on like a glove, and tipped half the bottle of oil over it. With her tongue sticking out between her teeth, Sophie scrubbed at the hinge. Flakes of rust began to peel off, and beneath them was bright brass. Her heart began to pound. Once she had got it smooth enough, Sophie clicked back the latch. It was stiff, but the oil in her fingers helped, and pushed hard at the window. Nothing happened. She pushed harder. It creaked angrily and stayed shut. Sophie swore. She sank down to the floor. There was no reason to be so upset. She told herself it was just a window. It probably wasn't designed to open. For no reason at all, she found herself fighting that prickling feeling behind the nose that comes before the tears. "Calm down. You're being stupid," she told herself. "Think." She got to her feet, and as she did so, knocked something off her bedside table. It was the station woman's Chelsea bun. "Ah," whispered Sophie. The bun was stale around the edges, but still sweet and sticky in the center. She finished it in less than a minute. Sophie licked her fingers and instantly regretted it. The sugar and oil together tasted disgusting, and pulled herself to her feet. She spat on her hands and pushed at the corners of the window frame with all her weight. She heaved, then she leapt back as the skylight opened suddenly with a shriek. "Yes," she said. Without waiting to think, Sophie scrambled up. She laid one knee against the ledge and one foot on the bedstead, and then she gave a one-footed jump, and both her hands scrabbled for a hold on the roof outside. Then, with a grunt of pain and a tumble, she was onto the rooftop. Sophie crouched on hands and knees, waiting for her breath to slow. She was bleeding quite vigorously from one knee, and while she waited to stop shaking, she licked it and tied it up with her other stocking. The roof stretched away, flat and grey and smooth, and decorated here and there with bird droppings. There was a chimney stack and a weather vane, and black soot layering everything. She thought the rooftop must be one of the highest for miles. A single pigeon watched her. She made a face at it. It looked haughtily at her and turned its back. Sophie crawled to the edge and looked out across the city. Paris lay below her, coloured in shades of night blue. The city was a cross-hatching of roads and squares. In the moonlight, she could see the tops of bright shop awnings. They were surprisingly dirty, seen from above, and the concentric circles of two smart gentlemen's hats as they passed. Top hats. Look much less stupid, she thought, seen from rooftops. And from up here, she thought, the streets looked like rivers. The river itself was a quicksilver in the moonlight. The wind shifted and the wet hay smell of horses hit her. She leaned further out and looked straight down. This was a mistake. She softly whispered a swear word and her stomach dropped down into her pelvis. She found herself retreating rather quickly and digging her nails into the brickwork of the chimney. Stacks for reassurance. She had never been this high up, ever. The moon looked close enough to hit with a pebble. Sophie peeled off her nightgown and stood up in her knickers and vest. She spun on the spot, and the Paris sky spun in time with her. The wind blew stronger, and a great bubble of happiness was rising up through her chest into her nose. Sophie threw out her arms and danced a war dance round the chimneys, whooping very quietly under her breath. Sophie would have liked to stay out all night, but sometime after the clock struck 2, she grew cold and her knees began to bleed again. She wiped off the worst of the blood with leaves and wrapped it more tightly with her stocking before she lowered herself through the skylight. Just as her eye line dropped down inside, night shadows, she knew. Throw your eyes off kilter, and it was just a large bird or swirl of night air.